name is Charles McGrew. I'm not a professor. I'm just a staff schmo. Dr. Kulakowski is the professor. Hopefully he'll make it. He is very smart. When it comes to, for example, medicine, computing in medicine, he is one of the best. And so when we start talking about medicine, especially later on as we move further up toward now, it will be him doing a lot of the talk. I know that. Let's see. You may think it's kind of weird for a history class to have a lot, for a future class to have a lot of history, but that's the way it goes. As you will see, if you look at the writing things, the first ones are kind of dull, but as we get further along, it becomes more creative writing. And creative writing in the way you wish creative writing was. Not where, oh, you left a dangling participle, and you need a semicolon here, none of that shit. There you go again. But actual creative thinking and writing it down. That's what I want. The thing that I hope you guys can do is think. There's no right answers, there's no wrong answers. Well, there's lots of wrong answers. There are a few wrong answers. But I'm hoping this will let you think a little bit about the future and how you might be able to, or may not be able to, see into the future and be able to plan. So, another couple of minutes. I have one of this. Oh, told me that the people that I wanted to do that was not there. I know. The writing assignments, you will see they have 8 descriptions, and ish is a what? Well, she might be saying they're going. Oh, 5-ish pages is very carefully chosen. I don't want you to write books. I don't want to read books. I'm going to read them. I don't need it to be, English class good. Okay. I did very well in this last week. But I want you to be creative. I want you to try and synthesize, as they say in history class. And have some fun. So there's one of the assignments that says, when an apocalypse, when an end of the world. So you have to decide, or not end of the world, but very near. And so one of the things I do, what is it? You guys, there's a couple of handouts over there you can grab. Who lives, who dies? Another one is write your own utopia. How does it work? That kind of thing. Because the future is almost always trying to take your idea of utopia and make it reality. It's just that's what we all do. We want it to be perfect where we want it. For children or
mediators down?
What?
One of these computers. Lars was yelling about it.
Mediator? I have no idea.
Okay, so I guess I'll look after.
Sorry. It's the name of the machines will have really stupid names. So one of them apparently is called Mediator. You got a name of something, right?
I have mediator.
You have Mediator?
Not my problem, my problem.
Okay, cool. Alright. Anyway, so if it comes out longer, or if it comes out shorter, there'll be handouts of interesting stuff, I hope, to try and things. You'll find that some of the readings are actually watching, because I don't want you guys to have to read a lot. The longest thing I think is a science fiction, the first chapter of a science fiction novel. It's not all that. So, and if you think I'm asking too much, say so. Not now. But I tried to make this just enough so it would keep it fun. Well, you may not say that later. So,
I like your viewpoint.
okay,
What you should do.
you don't get a better grade. Anyway, okay. So, what is futurism? Oh, I should show you my. When nobody answers my question, any of you who play Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing might recognize a 20-sided die. I roll a 20-sided die, and that person answers the question. Then nobody answers. Everybody hates it for a while, and then they love it because it means they only have a 1 in 20 chance of having an answer. So, what is it? When you must have come here hoping to learn something, go.
Speculating about things to come.
Speculating is too easy. Okay? Anybody can speculate. That's science fiction. Anybody else? No, it's an interesting answer. It's what many people would say. And that's what many people call futuristic stuff. It's just speculating. It might be this.
Speculating what is likely to happen.
That's just his answer. Well, the
What
futurism
is
is...
likely to happen, not what's...
Okay, there. All right, that's... Okay. Futurism is trying to predict what the future is going to be like, knowing that we can't know everything. You look a little further down, there's a talk about magic. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so, yeah, and this is really hard, and everybody does it badly. When you read all these things about what's the future going to be like, everybody got it wrong, got it real wrong. And a lot of people died sometimes because they got it wrong. So what's a utopia? Go.
An idealized society in which is somebody's view of perfect. My utopia would be my idea of perfect.
Okay, very important what you just said, that second sentence. By the way, I don't want these two to answer all the questions. That's our tactic. A utopia is a perfect society. H.G. Wells, for example, in 1919, I think it was, wrote about a future in which he declared as a utopia, where there were the nations were all federated like states. So there was one government, and there was enough mechanization so that everybody had labor-saving devices and nobody had to work too hard. And this, he said, would just poof, utopia, because nobody had to work too hard. That was it for him. That didn't work out so well because it turns out people hate each other for sometimes good, sometimes unfathomable reasons. The Shia and the Sunni Muslims, they hate each other. They fight wars. You know why? They believe the same book, more or less interpreted the same way, and in the same prophet. Why do they hate each other? Why do Sunnis say that Shias have faith? You're doing it. Go ahead.
We generally don't like people different from us.
No, they're very similar to each other. I mean, there are Shias in countries right next to the Sunnis. Same racial layout. So no, go.
Fight over land?
No, it's way dumber than that. Well, if you're a Muslim, I apologize. To me, it's dumb. But no, although the Sunnis wound up having most of the land. So, from looking at it from our perspective, you might think that. So that's a reasonable answer. Anybody else? Go. You have to raise your hand water.
Different opinions?
Not really. That's the weird part. I mean, they wind up teaching different things, but that's not the root of their. If you're here for the Byrne Seminar, the paper handouts right there. It turns out to be a lot weirder from our perspective. Okay.
Some guy on one side said, those guys are stupid, etc., etc.
Okay, I'll let you out of this. It comes down to who is the proper religious descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad had no surviving sons. So in their culture, the first surviving any son was the inheritor. They didn't have any surviving sons. So the Sunnis and the Shias took, I can't even remember which is which, but one of them took a female descendant And the other one took, as I remember, the son of a brother, a nephew. You have to look it up yourself. But that's the difference. They taught the same stuff. But the thing is, in Islam, who is the descendant of the Prophet means everything. Because they interpret everything. So it turns out to matter to them a lot. That sure they have the same book, but they teach different stuff because they have evolved away from each other because of that dispute. And that's as simple as it is. So what's a dystopia? No, you.
Like the world is ruin and no one's...
Not necessarily.
Please repeat the word.
Stop. No, you're doing fine. Just go.
A society where you don't live, like
That's pretty good. A place where you don't want to live. A dystopia, I think, this is, you can look it up on Google, but a dystopia is a complete society that is self-sustaining, that you don't want to live in. That's it. A utopia is a complete society that is self-sustaining, that you do want to live in. And you can say, well, a utopia has no war. Not necessarily. But you want to live in it. Okay. We'll talk just, let's see here. All right, let's just jump ahead. Evolutionary versus revolutionary change. What's the difference? You guys, go ahead. Go ahead.
Evolutionary change would be seen as a progression, like a gradual progression based on, I guess, not necessarily logical, but steps that sort of make sense, whereas revolutionary is kind of a type of, would be jutting off into something.
A disjoint, but yes. Okay. Anybody else got something? Go.
It's like a progression versus like a complete replacement.
That's actually better. Go.
Isn't revolutions based on ideals and stuff like that?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Revolutions are based on ideals and different...
Well, most societies at least claim to be based on ideals.
Right.
But you can claim that the revolution, the French Revolutions claimed to have ideals, and then they started killing everybody.
Is evolution more like natural versus revolution?
When you're talking about societies, I'm not sure there's anything natural. But no. But in evolution is in biology, you're correct, and most people tend to equate the two, which I'm not sure is a good idea.
Evolutionary is more like development, where revolutionary is like a complete change.
Okay, that's basically what he said. Go.
Evolution is slow. Revolution is
Well, it depends on your perspective, but you're all basically got. Okay, there are these disjoints where suddenly everything changes, and they're usually based around wars, and that's usually because we may talk about this later. The wars cause societies to do things that they don't normally do. For instance, in World War II, the United States put a number of Japanese citizens, those living west of the Mississippi River only, who didn't want to move east of the Mississippi River, in prison camps. They were citizens. We don't normally do that, but we did. And that's because there was a war. That's often the reason for making major changes is there's a war. Okay, magic. Magic, we like to think of magic as impossible. But if I brought this to your grandparents, maybe your parents, but your grandparents when they were your age, this would be magic. This is a computer. It's got video, audio. It can talk to anybody in the world.
That's assuming that anyone in the world.
Assuming anybody has an idea, so maybe we'd have to bring them to us, true. But this is magic, okay? And they could not have seen it. Okay, when we look at the quotes, the first quote is from Alexander Graham Bell. Okay? Somebody says, what's the future of this technology? And he says, we might have one in every town in America. Well, that's That's remarkably shallow, isn't it? Okay? Fax machines, computers, didn't see any of it. Okay? This has unbelievable changes to our society. Your parents can reach you at any time, whether you want to or not. Well, you better answer. That didn't used to be true. But he was thought of as a seer of the future, and that's the best he could do. So, and here's my example of an odd magic. Hemophilia. You can read that for yourself. I'll just go real quick. Hemophilia is a disease, we still have it, although it's relatively rare, where your blood won't clot properly. And so you can literally bleed to death from a cut. So, in 100 years ago, 200 years ago, it was basically a death sentence. Kids didn't live beyond about age 5, 6, 7. Something went wrong and they bled at the end. The clotting agents that we have now just didn't know about. So, the Queen of England was Victoria. This is about 1880. She has a grandson. Her grandson is the king of England. Her grandson is the king, if you will, the Kaiser of Germany. The Kaiser, the Tsar of Russia is married to one of her daughters. Okay. What happened is that hemophilia ran rampant all of a sudden in the royal houses. And the one that is most interesting to me is in the Russian royal family, because the Tsar, we're talking about now right before World War I. The Tsar had 4 daughters and 1 son. And that one son was hemophilia. And he was the heir. So, in Russian society, such a disease was thought of as a mark of inferiority. Sickness was your own fault. So suddenly, that the Tsar, his heir, was a hemophiliac, made the entire royal family's cold and power worse. And a fellow up here is a guy named Rasputin, probably heard of him. And he was sort of the Ozzy Osbourne of his day. He was nuts. Or if you know who Russell Brand was, Russell Brand was there. And he could apparently cause the bleeding to stop. Nobody knows exactly how he did it, but it seemed to work. And so suddenly he had a lot of influence in the royal family. And that was one of the reasons that the revolutionaries in Russia pointed to for having to overthrow the Tsar, for the Russian Revolution and bringing the communists to power. So we can say from hemophilia we get Rasputin, we get World War I, we get the Russian Revolution, we get the Cold War, we get the space race, we get some other stuff I don't remember, and we get Vladimir Putin, all from hemophilia. Now, if you're trying to look at the future and say 1900 or 1890, how on earth are you going to be able to see that?
So look, have fun.
Well, the question is, can we work magic? I mean, that's essentially magic. Suddenly there was this magical blight on a major royal house in Europe, which had effects that we could recognize. In other words, it wasn't like, he caught fire and blew up. We can see all the what. So why couldn't anybody beforehand see all the what? I'm not sure I know the answer.
It's a very his ability to stop the bleeding was very unusual.
Well, yes, that's true. So he was thought of as somehow he was a monk. So he was thought of not as a magician, but as a holy man, which made it even worse. Because now he can say that this power comes from God, so you can't just throw him, whisk him away as a charlatan. He's a monk, he's a man of God. So I don't know. But what we're going to try and do is when at the end of the class, you're going to be writing your own future. You can see at the bottom. Here's the man himself. This is Dr.
Hey, you
Provoked.
have the right slide. I just flew on.
Okay.
No, so clear whether it's friendly, but anyway, they are fun.
This is the gang, Dr. Bill.
Nice to meet you all. Yep.
So if anybody represents any of this stuff right here, some of this stuff is pretty damn obscure. So let's see. I'm going to skip the smallpox, but we might get that around to that again. But smallpox is a weird disease because it was a ravager of continents. The main reason that the white man was able to take North and South America was because we brought smallpox with us. And it killed millions of natives. And they were unable to defend themselves because when you kill, some people say 80% of everybody, it just doesn't recover. You think that God is smiling, God is frowning on you, something's wrong. You're doing something wrong. And when this other guy comes along with his bang stick and his big tall thing, which is a horse that you don't know what it is, maybe he's from God.
Or
So,
big ships with large sails.
Indeed.
Same thing.
So-
all
so,
turned out to be an
so-
accident of immunology.
But how did we beat smallpox? Anybody know?
Vaccine.
Where did the vaccine come from? There are actually two vaccines. So let's see what your answer is.
Didn't we have like some level of natural immunity that when we came, which is why we killed them? So
No. By the time we came to North and South America, we had a limited immunity. It was still prevalent, but we could be carriers. So yeah, so that's true. Why? But I mean, how did we beat? We as a people, we as a world, how did we beat smallpox? Nobody gets smallpox anymore, right? Vaccines, but there are two. That's the interesting part of the story is there are two. Okay.
Do you mean how did we get the vaccines?
Yeah.
We chickenpox.
No, close. You're in the right area. So stop.
About cows instead of chickens.
Yes, but there are actually two. The people noticed that if you gave a small amount of a disease to someone, they may develop an immunity. So what they would do is they would take the pus from a smallpox blemish and stick it under people's skin and hope that they would develop an immunity. About 2 out of 10 died. But the death rate from smallpox by itself was about 6 out of 10. And that was seen as better. But there was a guy who noticed that women who worked with cows got a disease called cowpox. And that if you got cowpox, you never got smallpox. And so they started, and they still do to this day, they give cowpox, which is benign, so that you won't get smallpox. And that's how we beat smallpox. It's that weird. That's another magic, right? Some guy just figured it out. He didn't know anything about, this is back in the 1790s or something?
Yeah. Jenna.
Yeah, thank you. They didn't know anything about cellular biology or disease.
Immunology as such. Right.
Yeah. Antibiotics didn't exist. So that's magic. Okay, that's a good magic. Okay, not if you're an American Indian, perhaps. Okay, so now we're going to go quick. Let's see. Okay, we'll do questions. Okay. So I'm just going to run through these real fast, and you just speak out answers. I got my answers here. Okay, so most important event of the 1700s. Go. American Revolution. Interesting. Why?
Because that's how American values work. Independence.
You won't have this trouble of Hillary versus Trump if there wasn't the.
Yeah, we'd have to worry about Charles versus Camilla. Well, yes, that's a high school answer. I don't mean to put you down, but think because one of the things that it is true is that because of the American Revolution, we had the French Revolution. We wouldn't have had the one without the other. So the American Revolution is very important, but it's important in not just because of what happened to us, but what happened to everybody else. Suddenly we're standing up and saying, although not to our slaves, all men are free and equal. Nobody had said that. Not and made a country out of it. So you're brighter than I made you say. I'm sorry. But the French Revolution is, and the reason that the French Revolution happened is because, well, one, we showed that equality was possible, and for another, the French bankrupted themselves up. It's very complicated. So my other one was the French Revolution. Anybody else? Well, thank you for being brave. Oh, go. Who said it? Somebody said Somebody said I heard it It was said, he says it too.
Development of rifles weren't made yet.
Actually, they were. That's a very interesting answer.
Rifle
Rifle muskets were available in before 1800. Yes. In fact,
just they became much more accessible.
much more accessible, much more accurate. Suddenly, there should be a handout right down there.
In the American Civil War, muskets, holy crap, one shot and you're probably dead. Or at least out of war.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's an interesting question because it has a lot of little effects that don't look out.
That if it wasn't a serious part of the Revolutionary War, then we can't say that it's.
Well, it was certainly an important part of the War of 1812. Revolutionary War, no. But an interesting answer. Okay, how about the you got one more?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm pretty sure I read this in history training, so you can question the validity of it. But I think that one of the, or no, this is on Deadliest Warrior, so you can absolutely question the validity of it. But they talked about how when the American revolutionaries were running like little guerrilla like hit and runs, they would use extremely accurate rifles to fall away.
Yeah,
Well, it's extremely accurate for the time.
yes and no. There were some riflemen, but most of the interesting riflemen for the war were actually in a couple of rifled units that fought with the musket. No, the rifle musket is a very interesting idea. I really thought about it. How about the 1800s? Go.
The American Civil War.
Why?
Well, basically.
No, come on. Why?
Well, basically, it was like, I guess, like, I'm not really sure. It's just.
All right. Well, next time we should have a why. And I'll give you a why because it pays the check that we wrote to African Americans.
Yes.
Okay. We said all men are created equal, and it wasn't true. And then finally, in 1865, it was. You had one? You didn't. You lied.
I'm not 100% sure on exact dates here, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of Tesla's work happened at the very beginning.
Yeah, 1890s, 1880s. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Anybody else know who Tesla is? Nikola Tesla, he was a light bulb. Huh?
Light bulb?
No. AC current, that's Tesla. He was an electrical engineer in late part of the 1800s, early 1900s. And he was the inventor of alternating current, the current that we use in our plugs. And the reason that's important is because AC electricity can be transmitted long distances. So you can have the power station on Niagara Falls powering New York City, whereas the alternative, which was put up by Edison, would require a power generating station about every couple of blocks. Not very good. So Tesla's very important. That's most of the way. He did a lot of interesting stuff, but the AC current is the winner. Anybody else for the 1800s? Go.
Was the cotton gin one of the 1800s?
Oh, that's interesting.
Is it like, it kind of was like...
No. That's the cotton gin and the mechanization of agriculture in general. Yes. Okay. It's a mechanization that we don't often think about because it was typically a mechanical device pulled by a horse or by a cow or something. But it was a threshing machine. It was a cotton gin. It was taking agriculture and textiles and all these things and making them not a hand-made item. So now we have the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. So that's a very interesting thing. Anybody else?
Industrial Revolution sounds good.
Industrial Revolution sounds good. Well, I'm glad you
And before that, what was a programmed version that a French guy developed that is in all your computer history books?
I don't know.
Something to do with what all of us are wearing, clothes?
Oh, the Holland stuff? Oh, Chakar. Chakar Loom.
Chakar Loom. Programmed loom.
Yes.
First idea of
Yeah.
programming patterns.
There was a guy,
for
a
weaving.
freshman, who was a weaver, and he figured out that if you could make a weaving machine that would run threads through automatically, and then all you had to do was figure out what threads to move, so you could get patterns. And he figured out that if you punched holes in pieces of wood and then ran wires through them at every step of the thing, you run this way and then it would shift up to the next one. You could figure out which ones go through. So now you can make patterns on clothing and make them by the ton. It's another way of the Industrial Revolution because it's industrial control. You have one? Or you just go? No? Anyway?
And before that, the whole business of steam, right?
Yeah.
And coal that still powers us, despite the fact of it being dirty. If we haven't figured out
Steam
how
power,
to, use steam effectively. And
Telegraph.
if you live in New York City, you still see the steam coming out of some of the vents in the ground, and you hopefully walk around it so you don't get scalded. But it was critical without that.
Karl Marx.
And then gas became also massive gas lighting. I
Napoleon.
mean, if you think for a moment, our ability to do this as opposed to sitting outside in the gloom, right? Being able to live 24-hour lives, pretty much, all from lighting. There's some fascinating books about how technology of lighting has totally transformed our
You need
lives.
poor people who could not afford candles. Sun goes down, you go to sleep. Nothing else to do. Electricity comes along, and now your schedule is your own. That's a huge change societally.
Some people argue that it was much more relaxing before. Guaranteed that you'd go to bed at sundown or with difficulty shortly after dark.
Okay, how about 1900 to 1910? This is just trying to get your thinking, because we're going to talk about your assignment is has things to do with this. Yeah. Go.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is right at that time, and this kind of plays in what we were thinking about before with the cognitive mechanization of industry, but I'm pretty sure Ford's assembly line.
Ford there were assembly lines before Ford, but he was the one who made it with cars. So he made cars. I mean, it's very important, not so much because it's cool, but because suddenly the price of cars plummets. And now this country becomes a car nation in a way that nobody ever was, and really no one ever had been. The closest thing is Japan, of a car-based company. But in Europe, to this day, cars are not the most important thing. If you go somewhere, you probably go by train.
Or bus.
Well,
That's hardly honestly. Troy.
1910 to 1920. You haven't answered anything for a while.
Like advances in warfare, like World War I, like you can have like gas stuff, like mustard gas.
Okay, gas warfare. All right, fair enough. The machine gun pre-exists World War I, but its first usage is there. Okay, that's good. Yeah. 10 to 20. 1910, 1920, please.
I don't know, it might have happened after 1920, but when we started to get about the credit and things like that, was that around after 20?
Nah, You're thinking about the crash in 1929, and not yet,
Oh, yeah.
not yet. It's an interesting idea, because some people will say that it begins in those years. I'm not so sure I believe them, but it's an interesting answer. You.
I could be wrong with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand.
Beginning of World War I. That's a very important event. It takes the death of a noble in Austria-Hungary, and winds up with 17 million people dead. Yeah, that's important.
Probably more.
Well, depends if you count the player.
Just in Poland, I saw the cemeteries of people buried there.
Okay, that's
not a pleasant sight.
Okay, yes, mechanized. We're taking mechanization and now moving into the battlefield. That's true. Before this, it was the horse and that was it.
Essentially fixed
Yeah. Most important event in 1910 to 1920.
Russian Revolution.
Russian Revolution. Very interesting. Okay, that event colors everything up until at least 1992, and some would say even after. I mean, Putin, ex-KGB, Russian communism. Okay, everybody in power in Russia is still a communist, as much as they ever were. Very interesting answer. Okay, let's go on. 1920 to 1930. You.
Oh, sorry. Just throwing out. Could be some of the marketing. Is that when?
No, I see where you're going. That's interesting. Everybody understand what he's talking about? He's talking about mass marketing. Okay, advertising. I mean, it's happened before. I mean, there's advertising in the Sears catalog. In the about 1860 on, you could order from the Sears catalog and have pretty much anything mailed to your house. So that was a kind of advertising. But building a market through advertising is a relatively new invention, and that's a good one. I like that. Good. Nothing happened between 1920 and 1930.
Especially as a female. Come on, think what happened back then, very recent, shockingly recent. What?
Suffrage?
Right.
What she said. Women got to vote in this country. They didn't get to vote until, what, 24?
Something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
You're going to have to do better than that next time.
1920 and 1930.
Yeah.
Stock market. I think someone already said
The stock market crash, okay? It's a very unusual thing that a stock market crash would affect the entire world, but it did. And it brought things to power like the oil. And so yes, the stock market crash, very, very important. My parents lived through the Depression, for example, and it colored everything that they ever did with money, everything. It was that traumatic. The Depression happened when my dad was 15. But all his life, everything that he did was colored by that experience.
When you've been reasonably comfortable and suddenly crash into poverty, in some ways it is more shocking than if you've been poor all your life. And keep that in mind, because essentially that gave rise to the kind of deep resentment that unfortunately fuels certain what we call reactionary political movements anywhere in the world. And we're sort of seeing it coming up again now, for not quite so clear or dramatic reasons, but it's there. Okay? So from a social point of view, very dangerous. It draws on our worst instincts. Right? We were rich, now we're poor. How the hell did that happen? And who do we blame? Who's going to be the scapegoat this time? Right? That seems to be an easy, natural human reaction.
Okay, 1930 to 1940. Yeah, you.
World War II.
Well, it starts then. All right, that's a big one. That's very good. You.
I wouldn't say Hitler's rising powers.
Well, okay. One leads to the other. That one leads to that one. Yeah, okay, go.
I was going to say the Great Depression. I think that's the time where...
Okay, that's true. The Depression really, and everybody says 1929, but it was like October of 1929. So really, the 1930s is the Great Depression. Yes.
32 at best. started biting down.
That's all right. Yeah, go.
Spanish Civil War.
Spanish Civil War, very interesting, because that's a precursor to World War II. The Germans are in it, the Russians are in it, in certain ways, the United States is in it, the British are in it, everybody's in it, and everybody's trying out the stuff they're going to wind up killing each other with later on.
Prohibition, I think.
Prohibition starts in 1919.
1918, 1919.
Yeah, I think it ends in 32. I know that. So it certainly, we didn't talk about that in the 20s, but yeah, that's another one, because the depression, I'm sorry, the word, prohibition, prohibition suddenly doing something illegal is entirely acceptable in ways that it was not true before.
It led to the rise of massive organized crime. I mean, there's always been organized crime everywhere, but large scale, that's
It was bootlegging that made the mobsters rich, and also it made John F. Kennedy's father very rich.
different mafia, right?
He might have been.
Was this one the first computer was invented?
I think actually it's 40 to 50. I mean, well, there was some mechanical ones. So, but the first electronic ones come later. So you're in the right area, okay? And computers are very important, as we know. You got one in front of you pretty much all the time.
Critical back to medicine. Do you remember what was discovered in the 1930s?
Oh, good point.
Penicillin. Most of us would not be here if it weren't for penicillin and antibiotics.
Penicillin got rid of one thing that was nobody had an idea this was going to happen. Penicillin cured venereal disease in a way that was impossible before. You got syphilis, you basically waited and died. Okay, suddenly there was this cure. You could have sex again. Okay, or if you got shot, you might live and you might not lose a leg. So yeah, antibiotics are a huge change. You think of them as having always been here. But 100 years ago, no.
Think about pneumonia. Most people in my family, my father's older sister was a doctor. She picked up pneumonia from exposure to all kinds of things from patients. She died in my father's arms, aged 41, 42, before I was born. Tragic. Happened to a lot of people.
All right, we'll go faster.
Nothing you could do.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was it. You got the flu. You either died or you didn't.
That's why
And one of the things that nobody mentioned was there was a flu called the Spanish flu in 1918 to 1920ish. 50 million people died. More people died in that one event than died in all of World War I. 50 million people all around the world. And unless you go looking for it, nobody talks about it. It's a very strange thing. Killed many more people. Many more people in this country died from the Spanish flu than died in World War I. Many more. But we almost never talk about it. And it was one of those things. I mean, if you got it, well, I hope good luck. Please don't cough on me. That's it. All right. Let's go fast to the rest. 1950 to now. Let's go real fast.
Vietnam.
Why?
It's a point of war that we got involved in.
Huh?
I said it was an important war we got involved in.
That was pretty minor. We made a big deal out of it because we lost. That's about it.
Which one did you say?
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
That's not. Oh, okay, yeah, right.
It was the anniversary of the Dong effect.
No, seriously. Yes. That if and return. I might argue that Korea was more important. But I can understand. In modern histories that are written by people who were born in that time, Vietnam is very much important than anything else. Mostly because they remember it. The guys are historians. So they have to be careful about that. Yeah. The Cold War in general. Okay, that's the real reason for Vietnam is we thought the Cold War was part of the Cold War when it sent for Korea. Very important. Like I said before, the space race. The only reason we really went to the moon was to beat the Russians. If we weren't in the Cold War with the Russians, it's not clear we would have ever done it. Yeah.
I'd like to point out that the Vietnam War was like the first war that had like huge American opposition towards it and sparked a lot of protests.
There turned out to have been protests in Korea that they just didn't get as much play. So
this is a new news media.
Yeah,
It's probably at its most free from before or afterwards during the Vietnam War. So you saw all the horrible things that were happening in Vietnam, and a lot of people, your age in particular, said, "Why the heck are we doing this? You know, why are we being asked to kill people?"
No, I mean, I had a chance of being drafted to go fight in Vietnam. Luckily, I was a little too old when it came time. I came along just a little too old before I got there. But as wars go, I mean, would you think that the Civil War had fewer people who were opposed to it? I mean, if you go back and read about a group called the Copperheads, which was a Democratic Party opposition in the North to Lincoln. So we've always hated going to war. It's just Vietnam had the best film, in my opinion.
Most rational people oppose going to war. Most young people your age who don't think are eager to go to war, particularly if you're male and have a lot of testosterone flowing. Say, hey, I'm failing at school, I'm failing in my job, why not go and bust up some heads? Consequences of that is...
Let's not get too cynical there, sir.
Listen, I've survived enough and my father survived more, so I'll share some of that.
Okay, I understand, but I mean, we kind of did save Europe from the Nazis, and we did save Europe from the Kaiser. We did save pretty much everybody from the Russians. So, well there. Sometimes it is important.
Their interpretation is different.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, would you argue then that the soldiers in the North was a bad choice for them to fight to free the slaves?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, go.
Sorry to go back a little bit. We went past this already, but it's actually really important. Woodrow Wilson's 14 points that established free travel of the seas and a bunch of
which never actually came.
Well,
but it's a very you're right. It's a very interesting marker to put down to say we as Americans believe that freedom of the seas, freedom of religion, freedom. Yeah. And it was recast as something called the Four Freedoms in World War II. Very, very, very similar. It's the same ideas, basically. So, yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, Woodrow Wilson, before the U.S. entry in World War I, came up with this thing called the 14 points, which was a list of things that we said were important to us and why we would go to war. Now, it turned out we didn't actually follow it very well, but it was a very important marker, morally, for us to say, this is what we believe. In the same way that the Emancipation Proclamation says, we believe this. I mean, everybody said, before that, everybody was saying, well, the slaves, maybe what good is it? Emancipation Proclamation comes along and says, this is what we believe. This is what we're fighting. So the 14 points actually is more important than it was given at the time. And in fact, it's pretty interesting. Anyone else? You're a good group, by the way. You're fine. Okay. So, let's get out that say what sheet. This one. Okay. So we did the Alexander Graham Bell. Life is the art of drawing sufficient conclusions from insufficient premises.
We keep trying to basically decide what's going to happen. There is no proper material to read.
An interesting way to put it. Anybody else?
We look back at past happenings in order to predict the future.
Not as often as we look.
Like politically and the such. But the thing is that in the past we didn't have cell phones. In the past we didn't have widespread cars. In the past we didn't have the subway. In the past most people didn't go to college, etc., etc.
Yeah.
We use the past in order to try and
what does that have to do with
how well things demographically work?
I think you're aiming too hard to be relevant to this class.
Life is like predicting the future, even though you can never truly do so.
That's a better way. I understand what you're trying to say, but you're being too diffuse, if you will. Okay. In general, we never know enough to make good decisions. We can always tell ourselves, well, I should have done this because now I know, but you didn't know. Okay? And that's what we have to do when we're trying to think about the future. We have to recognize that we don't know enough, that we can't know enough, and we still have to try. Just like everybody else. We're just going to try and do it better by thinking about it harder. Everybody thinks about the future every day. But usually it's, next week, next year. But what about, 100 years from now? After we're all gone, what's it going to be like? Can I do anything to make that a nicer world? That's what we're going to try to do. Next one. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Go.
A lot of events occur proximate to each other.
Okay, that's literally the game. Anybody else?
History may not repeat itself, but yes, go ahead.
Humanity continually does similar things, but as the circumstances in which humanity exists changes, what we do specifically changes.
Wow. Very good. Okay.
So what doesn't seem to change if we read the Iliad and the Odyssey, or read the ancient Chinese oracle bones, and read the various traditional Indian stories? What hasn't changed according to most people?
We're still Homo sapiens.
Well, there's a lot more than that. We can understand what happened. When we think about the people in the past who did stuff, we can understand them.
We think we see ourselves in them.
Yeah. Because it's the same kind of story. It's not like 100 years ago they did everything different in a different language. And did it for different reasons and worshipped corn or something. It's slowly evolving.
What we used to call human nature, and still do, doesn't appear to have changed in the 5,000 or so years of remaining written history. It has changed, we don't know for sure, but the stories that remain don't seem to be that different from the stories that we write today in terms of how people behave. And that makes it very interesting. Though, and this is an interesting thing, Origins of Virtue, interesting book written by a former writer for The Economist, Matt Ridley, about game theory, evolution, and the development of trust among people against all odds. In other words, rationally, the prisoner's dilemma type situations suggests that we are constantly going back to what ecologists call, and you've probably heard, the tragedy of the commons. Everyone takes care of themselves, and the common good falls apart. Well, he talks about exceptions to this, unusual exceptions, and does it with evolutionary biology, talking about all kinds of different biological species and different niches, finally to humans, and why we need to develop trust among each other, and yet how hard it is to do when you're in a competitive rather than a cooperative situation.
Which we all are.
Exactly, and the big challenge pointed out, I work in artificial intelligence, is gaming. How do you play off competition and cooperation among groups? So groupishness of people is at the root of both all human social virtue and all human social perfidy, if you want, right? Evil.
I have read The Tragedy of the Commons because I was in AP Environmental Science. Tiny little thing is that by current trends, the world's going to hell because carbon dioxide is getting way too concentrated up there.
We're not absolutely sure, but there's certainly indications they might be.
Well, there's a long story about that says people say that that's true because it's getting warmer, and then people say, well, it's not as warm as it has been, and we didn't have SUVs to make it warmer. The medieval warming period, the ancient Greek periods where the temperatures were many degrees above the ocean. So what I see, the carbon dioxide thing is not necessarily a more than it's a number that has gone up, and therefore it goes up and down. But let's not fight that war.
Modeling ecologies, and especially computing ecologies, just think of that, is one of the most difficult challenges you guys in your generation is going to face. And one of the greatest opportunities for you to make big bucks if you do it right. So think of it from the competitive point of view too.
Can I ask a question to the class?
Sure.
Who believes in global warming or unnatural global warming?
And that's relevant. Why?
Because the future, if global warming happens, then many species, especially among the poles, penguins, polar bears, will suffer seriously.
Really? Why?
Because
Polar bears can swim.
Polar bears can swim, but they
They
have
can also walk. They can walk too. They can live in Alaska.
They'll turn into brown bears again. You know, they weren't polar bears before the current freeze.
Okay,
so
that whole 90% of this or 18% of that, that's not science.
yeah, 99% of everything has died.
Okay, you all believe that God exists and that He is a big guy with a beard in the sky. That's not science. That's religion. Okay, wait. Just because you all believe something doesn't make it true.
It makes it more relevant.
No, it doesn't. It means you're using religion rather than science. Science is not a matter of consensus. Okay? Anytime somebody says, a consensus of scientists said, you can stop listening. Because it's not science.
It's what many people happen to believe.
That's belief.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay? That's not science.
Now, science involves an awful lot of belief. However, science tries to look for fundamental truths that are invariant to people's belief systems. However, being humans, hey, we're loaded with beliefs that color our science. What can you do, right?
So,
what about theory? Theory is science, then isn't theory also belief? Theories are beliefs, but theory is also considered science.
well, that's one and part of a problem of bad labeling. Is it a theory of gravity?
It's a law, right?
What?
I think it's a law, right?
Well, but I mean, you could call it a theory of gravity if you wanted to. That's what I'm saying. It's a matter of labeling. The
A
theory of evolution.
law is
The theory of evolution.
that was very well tested.
I mean, the theory of evolution. Okay, that's bad labeling. Okay? Evolution is the best answer we have to what we observe. Okay? But as long as we call it theory. No, it's not. Because
What is your understanding?
well,
Your belief.
no, I look at other, I see what you believe, and I say, but your belief doesn't match the fact. And then I don't have to do anything more. The fallacy that you're saying is that if I say you're wrong, I have to come up with an alternative. No, I don't. That's your business. That's your problem. You're wrong. You have to fix it. I don't have to fix it for you.
Isn't that the teapot argument? I forget, I think it's like Russell's teapot.
Russell's teapot. Between Earth and Mars in space, there's a teapot that is orbiting the sun.
Good.
But it's also
You can't
invisible and
disprove
you can't
it.
find it.
But you can't prove it either.
Yeah. First
All I have to do is say you can't prove it. I'm done.
Can you prove that there is?
I don't have to do it. I can say you can't prove it, and I'm done. Okay? That's the fallacy. That you say, if you think I'm wrong, show me show me your theory. I don't have to. You're wrong. That's it. That's science.
That's why science is based traditionally on proving things wrong, discovering things that may be right, in the sense of true, but generally disproving all kinds of bizarre theories, like phlogiston and the humors in the body and all kinds of stuff like that. That's what gets disproven, that's what tends to advance science, but we never ever are sure of, things like the Big Bang. There's still questions about exactly what is it, why it happened.
Anybody who says that the time for debate is over and the science is solved is a lie. Okay? The science is never solved. Ask any scientist.
Science is endless inquiry, right? You constantly keep asking questions. If you don't, then you're in trouble. Then you're being a belief-based science of some sort, which is not real science. Real science only asks questions and tries to prove or disprove. But proving is hard in reality. Proving is easy in theory if you accept the closed world assumption. That's the key behind all theoretical developments. You have your assumptions, your axioms, like you do in mathematics, and then you derive stuff. But those assumptions, there's no way that you're going to prove them. You're assuming a baseline, right? So that's what we're stuck with. Right? You have to be willing to be a relativist, at least to that degree, philosophically. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
Okay, good. Once something has occurred, a historian will tell you it was inevitable. We've all read history books like that. Go.
I don't know if this is like exactly, but this kind of reminded me of like a hindsight is 20/20.
Fair enough. But I mean, if you read a history book, they will say things like, it was inevitable that so-and-so and so-and-so would happen. No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Exactly. It wasn't inevitable because nobody knew what was going to happen. It was inevitable that the South would lose the Civil War. No, it wasn't. The North had to win the Civil War for the South to lose the Civil War. The South, it was obvious that the South could not survive as an economy because it had, no, it wasn't obvious at all. It certainly wasn't obvious to anybody at the time. So
certainly an alien race could have joined the Civil War and destroyed the North and kept its top.
That's true. I'm sure that's,
of course,
a historian would say that. But I'm just saying, you have to be careful when you read history, especially. Historians will tell you something. It wasn't. The attack was impossible. It was not. No, that's not true. Nothing is inevitable to the people who were there at the time. History teaches everything, even the future.
So basically, you should learn from history because if something bad in history happens, you don't want to really repeat that in the future.
You do. Okay. No, I think about it. You're right, but I wish you'd be more about it.
It's a good common sense humor.
Yes, no, that's
a curiosity.
Yeah.
But as long as you don't believe it too strongly.
You're obviously not a history major. No, you.
Okay. You can most things that happen in the past get played out again in the future just in different circumstances. Like the same situations and same problems arise just in a different time. So you can learn from the past to adapt to the future.
Okay. That's kind of what he said, but that's okay. What I think is that in a similar situation, you can bet how people are going to react if they reacted to something similar in the past.
Human nature.
Okay, human nature is often used badly, but yes. And if you use it in a rigorous way, yes. The more you know about the past, the better you are prepared for the future. Sort of the same thing.
Possibly.
Yeah.
As long as you don't overgeneralize.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to be careful about what you say. Oh, this is the same situation. Because
this is one of the foundations of thinking in artificial intelligence. You want to figure out your theories here, try to generalize stuff, but be very careful when you apply them, because when you apply them, remember you're dealing with a specific problem, and you've done well, better be sure that those general assumptions somehow apply. And the somehow is where there's a lot of hand-waving, and that's why you have to really understand prediction, is impossible, even though we find it very necessary to our survival. But really, it's called guessing, educated guessing.
So you can read some of the rest of this.
My advisor, who was a atomic physicist who worked on the German and Japanese atomic bombs during the war, and then was brought over by the Americans here, and I met him when I was a student at Yale. He was a student of Heisenberg, who worked on the German one. He wrote a book on pattern recognition called Knowing and Guessing. And the whole point of a lot of what we talk about in futurism, what we talk about in machine learning and AI and everything else, is anticipating things in clever ways, as long as we don't fall into the trap of really believing that we're predicting things. Okay? We're controlling as far as we can design artificial agents that do things pretty reliably. They will work well for us and improve our lives. If we're unlucky, they will hit a glitch, some new unexpected circumstances, and the whole set of assumptions that we've gone under may not apply anymore. Always be ready for that, right? That's why the biggest advantage that we have, apparently, over most other species, and often over each other, is adaptability. Figuring out that the rules of the game are that there are no rules, right? Or that they have changed from the rules that everyone else accepts and believes in. So our competitive advantage is figuring out how we can twist the rules to our advantage. That's the name of the competitive game, right? Or meta game, if you want to think of it. The game beyond the game, which is the game philosophers and AI people think.
So, a lot of this other stuff was that you could read. Does anybody know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses?
What?
Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't want to talk about religion a lot, but to me, they're a very interesting group. Not because of what they believe, I don't really care what they believe. But that they have repeatedly predicted the end of the world, literally the end of the world, and been wrong. And survived as a religion. I actually have a list. In 1872, they predicted the end of the world in 1874. In 1873, they changed their minds and said the end of the world would be in 1914. They made a lot of hay out of it.
We were down close for a lot of people.
Yes, they made a lot of hay out of that. In 1889, they said it was 1915 instead of 1914. In 1916, they said it was 1919. In 1921, they said it was 1925. In 1929, they said it was in 1975. In 1966, they said 1975 again, and in 1978, they said it was in a whole other thing and no date was involved.
Wonderful example of not making specific predictions.
Yeah,
Chances are you'll be wrong.
So,
general ones, sure, you can get away with. Wave your hands. But the world will come to an end. No, sure it will. At some point. Maybe not after
If anything, then probably the sun will explode.
Yeah, we'll collapse.
The end is right there.
But the thing that interests me is not they're a Bible study group. And they're a Bible study. They're like a Seventh-day Adventists. It's not that they abandoned their religion or anything like that. They didn't abandon their church. Their church was repeatedly wrong. And they might have just said, okay, well, you guys go over there. We'll keep believing what we believe. We're going to be over here. Didn't happen. It's a very interesting thing that I'm not sure happened outside of communism in later years, where people predicted things and were repeatedly wrong, but nevertheless people still believe it.
Still, apocalyptic thinking is very common and seems to be built into a lot of people. I mean, if we've experienced very bad times, it's not surprising for us to extrapolate and figure it's the end of the world is coming. After all, it came for a lot of our friends and family and other people. Why shouldn't the end of the world be coming, right?
That's where that last quote comes from.
So
it's been said other ways that everybody thinks they live in the end times, but everybody thinks that it's the worst it's ever been when they're going up. Indeed. They don't study history. Even if they study history, it's very difficult to put yourself in the position of people in the past. You can look at what they did and say, gosh, they were stupid, or gosh, they were smart. If you've got to understand them, if you're going to understand their past, your present, their future, you have to be able to think like they, to understand how they thought. And so everybody thinks that theirs is unique, that their time is unique, that nothing is, you don't understand. You do that on Earth. I did that to my parents. I mean, you did that to your parents. You just don't understand. Well, your parents were young too.
There's some very strange tie into the very deep issue of why do we have hope? The very word hope is something very deep that we all have in order to survive, despite all the proof to the contrary that maybe we're a hopeless lot and we might as well shoot ourselves in the brain, right, because it's a hopeless world. The point is we don't. We want to live. We want to enjoy life despite the problems. For us it's easy in a comfortable world like this, relatively speaking. Imagine yourself in any prison camp or of the Soviets or the Nazis or any other group at any time, right? Or a slave of the Romans who've conquered you, or a slave of whichever empire has conquered you. It's a horrible life, right? And yet, most people have hope. A few fall into despair, and a very few come into these extremely interesting but very dangerous apocalyptic theories about how they extrapolate from their own despair into something that generalizes into this view of the coming end of the world. So it's a long story from the point of view of people. People have done it over and over again in all civilizations and all different groups. It's particularly intense in the Western tradition in certain ways, shall we say, which you all recognize.
So, okay, no, I keep talking over you and I don't want to because you say the interesting stuff. Okay, so we're going down to the futurists. So, who makes the future? Scientists, engineers,
Humanity.
Really? Is that diverse? There's no specialists who have a better handle on it? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm asking why you say it.
I like to believe that I, am a singular person who is currently not in any sort of position of power, can have just as much of an impact on the future as, I don't know, say Obama.
I fear you are in error. But,
I'd like to think so.
No, but I would say that through your life, you may have more to say. You have to be careful. You have, this instant in time is not your whole life. And you have to be careful to say, because the end game of that is, if I do nothing for it, it's the old raising awareness thing, right? Yeah, I've raised awareness. You haven't done anything, okay? You haven't solved anything, but you've raised awareness. Now, let's see, my responsibility for humanity is done. I've raised awareness. Okay? So you're right in the long view, but not necessarily in the instantaneous view. So I'd be careful. Because the end game of that is an aggregation of responsibility. We're all responsible for what happens in some way. But if we declare, I tried my best, I'm not responsible anymore, then you're a waste of skin. So, anybody else have anything? Yeah.
I think that we all have a say in control the future because the butterfly effect, the way if we impact one person, they can change someone else's life in some ways. I believe that.
Well, that's certainly a view I would not expect a rice farmer in Indonesia to take. No, I'd say that whole thing of we're all empowered and all that stuff is dangerous.
Well, not necessarily power.
We all have a responsibility, but we don't all necessarily have power now. And to think that we do is I think this is just that we're now way off script here. Is a dangerous philosophy because it says I tried my hardest, I don't have to try anymore. You had something.
I wanted to say mass movements and politics.
That's interesting. So not everybody, but people in motion. Very interesting idea.
And the corollary would be that our present situation the corollary would be that our present situation is created by the consent of the masses too. It's not just people in action, but consent can also create certain futures.
That consent of the masses stuff is dangerous because it makes the masses into unthinking objects. You have to be careful. The consent of the masses is an old thing that says we're here because we let it happen, which is true. Whatever it is, we let it happen because we didn't fight hard enough, or we didn't fight smart enough, or whatever. So, but the consent of the masses is in my opinion, a dangerous concept because it tends to belittle the masses.
Well, the consent of any group, whether it's massive or smaller, is a tricky concept. That's why voting was introduced in human affairs pretty early in the game politically, right? Various groups, even if it was among small oligarchic, small groups that were in power, they agreed that rather than fight each other, if we were going to have a reasonably peaceful negotiated resolution of our political differences or economic differences, we're going to vote on things rather than fight each other, right? Usually it's a combination of the two, but voting is the official way, because after all, hey, chances are more of you will survive, right? And yes, from a philosophical and a practical point of view, giving a group a property is a very dangerous thing, as Charles mentioned, because what is the will of a group, right? It's exactly what gets exploited by the leader, whether a dictator or a clever manipulator in politics in the traditional way. Right?
But we hear that kind of thing in red staters and blue staters, where blue staters are somehow less intelligent, or whichever one you want to say. Are less intelligent. They're dumb because they believe this. Very dangerous. Very dangerous.
And
because then you say, well, if you're dumb and I'm smart, I should be able to tell you what to do. And now we're off. Now we're off to tyranny.
Unfortunately, in history, that has been the way that the better values of ideologies, mostly religious ideologies, have been perverted by evil leaders, right? They have taken perfectly reasonable, what might be considered a consensus of virtues that most prophets and wise men and women have come up with, and what do? They twist them around so that they become weapons in the hands of the leadership of whatever the successful group is, right? And so that's why any ideology can be dangerous, and that's why scientists are dangerous to ideologies and other free thinkers, whether literary types or others, right? And that's what we tend to encourage in universities here. Free thinking. So we tend to be the enemies of any kind of authoritarian or fixed belief systems or groups that base themselves on power alone. We say, hey, why? Right? Each of us should have a voice. Each of us should do something different. Each of us should be creative. Each of us should not succumb to what is the easy temptation of the crowd or the group, right? It's an easy temptation, after all. When we're kids in the playground, who do you follow? The popular kids who are going to, if they're bad, be the bullies and beat up on other kids. And if we're really stupid, we go and join them in beating up on the other kids. Not a good thing, right? Usually recognized. Short term, maybe it's just the right thing. But long term, definitely not. We grow up and we realize it's not the ethical thing, and probably not good from a practical point of view.
Here's a question for you. If I want to be a tyrant and manipulate people, what do I have to give them? This is way off. There's nothing to do with it.
Sense of power?
No, I would say not.
Exploit their ideology.
Well, maybe.
How direction?
Maybe. Mine's real much easier. I got it from Rod Serling. I hope you know who Rod Serling is.
The image of you're doing the right thing.
Close.
I was just going to say whatever they want,
Whatever they want. It's because sometimes you can lead people in ways that are actually destructive to them, and they will let you.
a justification of your power.
Close. I wouldn't say justification, it's simpler than that. You gotta give somebody to hate. That's it. Give them somebody to hate and they'll do what you want. Because you can show that by hating that group, they're good. Hitler did that.
Case in point.
Any little tribal group.
Yeah.
The guys across the valley, they're the enemy.
Anybody who graduated from Berkeley. They always say that if you, it used to be that if you went to Moscow in California, the difference was there were more communists in California.
Morality is relative.
What?
That you could see as like forcing people to read morality is a relative thing.
Well, you're presenting them with an easy choice. If I hate them and by hating them I am good, I don't have to think anymore. I'm done. Thank you.
Because I'm on the right side of the fence.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the good guys, but not because I'm good, but because I hate them. Yeah, like that.
And beneath it all, it seems that our reflexes for fear as helping our survival seem to be much stronger than our reflexes for helping others, for love and for helping others, right? That's precisely what makes developing trust tough, right? It's easier to mistrust, fear, hate others than to help others and say, hey, we've got to work together. Seems to be built into some circuit up here. We don't know quite. We know some of them, but we're not sure entirely which.
Well, I want to compliment you all on not taking notes. That's good. It means you're thinking. You can read that Economist thing. I didn't actually put that in. The thing is, Economist or Statistician is a better job title. So that's a sore spot for me. Anyway, so the writing assignment. Any questions about it? By the way, you can always email me, McGrew@CS is on the first page, second page, if you have questions. And everybody knows how to use, you guys know how to use Sakai, right? You don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. All right. If you connect to a site called Sakai.representative, SAKAI, RUDGERS.edu, you can connect to the website for this collective. And so for next week, just bring a paper. I would prefer it not handwritten, just because.
Reading.
Well, I have to read it either way, but it's easier. I mean, I came from the generation where typing was easier than writing. You guys should be way ahead of me. So, if you have any questions about it, okay, like I said, this is a thinking thing, not intended to make you, fill out the pages. It should, with luck, if I've written a good assignment, it should just happen. Let's see.
Short and original is better than long, tedious, boring to you and boring to us.
Yeah, if you read anything that's cut and pasted out of Google, it's just fail. And the reading is to watch a video. It's from 1977. It's it was a series, and you'll have watch the first one and the last one. It's about change, technological change in this case, and societal change, and the web of things that come from and to change. And it's a very complex story, and it shows you what you have to think about in the future. To think about the future, you have to think a lot about the past, and maybe not about things you think are directly related. It's hard, but don't make it too hard for you. That's why it says 5-ish pages, because I don't want books because it's not fair to you.
We had a visit from a Stanford professor who predicted that in 20 years, all of us would be working 4 hours a day, and we'd be making tons of money, and we'd have a leisure life and enjoy things. So we all kind of wondered, those West Coast California types, what are they smoking? And unfortunately we were right. Very few people manage to position themselves, and the question is that the right way of positioning yourself anyway? to only work 4 hours a day.
Well, I mean, most of the people who wind up getting away with that are pretty reprehensible people. They're lawyers
Usually.
and money fund, money fund managers and things like that. Anyway, so no questions about the assignments? Okay, it's next week. So there's a reading and a writing, like I said. Hopefully they are not too difficult or too long. The video is 44 minutes long. And you may want to look at some of the other ones in that series, because they're all really good. Next week, we're going to meet in room 250 upstairs. I don't know if you've ever heard of a place called The Cave. It's a computer science lounge. And we're computer science people. You've been.
I'm a computer science person.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's here's a quick question. How many history majors? Or intend to be history majors? Economics majors? Oh, I'm sorry, I said that. What's that? I'm sorry. It wasn't intended about you, but I have, hopefully you'll prove me wrong. English? I'm running out of ideas. Physics?
Philosophy,
chemistry?
engineering.
Engineering, got one engineer. What the hell? What do you guys study?
CS.
Oh, okay, sorry, computer science. Oh, God.
All right. Majority. Okay.
Sorry, but we're not talking about flying cars.
No, I'm sorry. I was hoping to drag in some history majors.
It's been a long day, Charles.
Where is my flying car does not sound history-like.
Yes,
it
it
sounds
is.
science-like.
It is, but it is history. We've been promised flying cars. I mean, you guys have seen the Jetsons, right? Okay, flying cars since before that. You know, as long as there has been science fiction, there have been flying conveyance, and all the ones we have don't work very well. And
Actually, quadcopters are pretty good.
what?
Quadcopters are...
You want to fly in one?
Athlete.
Really?
If you provide me.
No. I would worry, actually, because quadcopters, you know how you get 4 rotors, and if any one of them screws up, you're dead.
Yeah, you have
Go
to
on.
be
You can-
very.
If propellers are big enough, then
Yeah, but
you can go on 2 stably
control.
just straight down.
Yeah, but you can't even auto-rotate. I mean, helicopters at least, you can use the rotor as a kind of wing to slowly bring you down in a controlled manner. But quadcopters, they fail in really awful. I know I've fallen off from the walls. If you ever go up to the hackerspace, you'll find our quadcopter, and it's basically covered in duct tape because you run into things really hard. But anyway, all right, computer science. Well, welcome to computer science. You should check out the cave and the hackerspace and all the other stuff. Do you guys have iLab accounts yet? All right, well, you probably will at some point soon. And these machines are part of the iLab. But I like going up to the cave just because it's nicer. And it's just a nicer. So, anyway, all right, you guys,